Hey, ladies, I got to tell you what just happened.
What happened?
So I'm trying to make sure that I have healthy meals, and I had my cereal that's really high in fiber out, and I poured my little milk, and I'm getting over a cold, and I went and I just ate my cereal. And about 10 minutes later, Brian was like, oh, I'm gonna have cereal for lunch too. And he goes in there and he's like, ugh, is the milk rancid? I was like, what do you mean, the milk I just ate?
Oh no.
Oh no. You didn't taste it
Did
when
you
you ate
smell
it?
it?
I don't know. Do I have COVID and I don't know it? I don't know.
Did it taste bad?
No, it tasted like I've been eating a lot of yogurt. It didn't taste like a full yogurt. I mean, when I went back and I smelled it, to me, it smelled a little yogurty, but Brian's like, don't worry. It's not totally rancid, but I'm definitely dumping mine out and throwing this milk out. The milk said it didn't expire till March 20th, but it has been opened, you know what I mean, for a while.
Well, I mean, some people are really sensitive sniffers, like milk sniffers, like me. I mean, I am a very sensitive sniffer with that kind of stuff.
But I have a sensitive sniffer too. I usually smell everything and Brian smells nothing. So now I'm nervous. Like, what does this mean about my sense of smell and what's going to happen to my butt since we've been having all the butt conversations?
I know what you need to do. Go sniff one of your kids. Like, go sniff
when they get home.
them.
Okay.
And if you can smell them, then you know that you're okay. Your sniffer is working.
So let's go through the worst case scenario with this milk. Okay.
Okay.
What's the worst thing that's going to happen to me?
Probably diarrhea.
Yeah, probably some diarrhea.
Okay. We don't
Some
think
reets.
Yeah. Okay. But there's like no like E. coli situation.
Not unless there's been a recall on that particular milk, but it can get a little old and sour if it's been open for too long. You know, usually after it's been open 7 to 14 days, they say that's enough.
But I love how Brian was like, you're fine, don't worry, as he's dumping his bowl of milk out.
Of course.
How are you feeling? Like, is your stomach upset? Are you doing okay?
I mean, to be honest, ladies, I was a little bit on the constipated side this week.
So this may have helped it.
Maybe it'll help. Yeah. Yeah.
But do you have gas right now?
I've been constipated, so I have a little gas. But I haven't had it. I just ate this like an hour and a half ago, so I don't know.
Well, if you start having those really stinky egg farts, then it might be the milk.
Good to know. Good to know. I know, but it was just like one of those things because whenever something smells bad, I always go to Brian, smell this. It smells bad. And he'd be like, why would I smell it if you already told me it smells bad? And it was like the same thing. You're fine. Don't worry that you just ate that. Dumping it out.
He's not going to eat it, but it's fine that you did.
You're good. You're good. Go get ready for the podcast. You're fine.
Oh, husbands.
That drama's about to end, cause gross. Stop asking for a friend, taboos. Ick is what we do, just science. Yeah, it's not so weird. Your gross out journey starts right here on Oh Gross.
So that was my oh gross moment of the day.
Nice. Well, I hope that your intestines will be okay tonight.
Yeah, me too.
Speaking of intestines.
Speaking of intestines, since we are on the subject of butts after last week's episode on bidets.
Bidet or not to bidet?
Yeah, which is funny. I was talking to Dr. Steve about our bidet conversation, and him and I were discussing how we think it's funny that so many people are okay with colonics, which I know there's a lot of benefits and controversy around it, but they're actually more dangerous than having a bidet, right? But yet bidets are still not as popular as a colonic.
Right.
Isn't that funny?
That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense when you think about it, which then brings me to, because we're speaking of colonics, the one time in everyone's life when they have to have a colonic, basically a home or a home version of making sure everything gets out of your bum is when it is time for your colonoscopy. Right?
Yes, the dreaded colonoscopy.
Well, in my household, we try not to dread it because as you guys know, Brian is a colon cancer survivor, now 15 years.
Yes.
And he is getting his colonoscopy actually this week. And Dr. Steve, who will be on, was going to come on today to talk to us, but he's not because he got his colonoscopy today.
Hey, Dr. Steve.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing we all need to schedule our colonoscopies. That's what the universe is telling us right now.
And the reason that we are going to talk about it is right now is March happens to be Colorectal Awareness Month.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the month that we take time to say, hey, what is going on with your bum, and make sure you check it out.
Yes.
So, and I think it is all too fitting to just come right off of the bidet and just dive into butts.
It makes perfect sense. It
Yeah.
makes perfect sense.
So just for anyone who doesn't know, and maybe most people do, but I'm just going to say this, colorectal cancer can start in the rectum, right? Or the colon. And our colon is really big. So with Brian, he had a foot of his colon taken out with his cancer surgery. But he still got a foot, but he still got a lot left.
Right.
And rectal cancer is obviously the part of the bum that we're a little more familiar with, right? Than the rest of our colon. Both need to be checked, right? And both need to stay up on. But there are so many things we can do, right? Now that are for our rectum to be properly checked. And also even our colon, even home tests that we'll get into later. But the most important fact that everyone needs to know is get your colonoscopy, right? Get your colonoscopy.
Schedule it.
And I see you nodding, Molly and Jenny. Schedule that colonoscopy, which leads me to the first very important question. We are all over the age of 45. That's all we'll say. Some of us are younger than others. No, I'm kidding.
We're aging like fine wine.
Molly, when did you have your first colonoscopy?
Unfortunately, I have not had my colonoscopy yet, and I need to because my dad has had polyps. There is a history on that side of the family, and so I definitely need to make an appointment and get scheduled in to get it done.
Jenny, when did you have your first colonoscopy?
I will admit that I am due and I have not had it yet. And there's not a lot of history in the family, but my doctor, because everything has gone up percentage-wise with women, she told me, you need to get this done. And if you don't get it done, you need to take one of these tests that they do. But, it doesn't replace a colonoscopy.
Well, and also I want, not to interrupt you, but I want it to be very clear. When we were younger, they used to say by 50, you have to get your colonoscopy. That is not true now. It is 45 years old.
It is.
The recommended age for colonoscopy is 45. If you have a history of anything in your family, under 45. I had my first colonoscopy, I think, when I was 30 something.
Yeah, I was going to say they'll have it younger, just like with women with getting their mammograms. It's the same thing. If there's a history, they definitely want to test you when you're younger.
And listen, that's why we're talking about this today, because Brian has given me permission to tell lots of crappy jokes to help raise awareness about colon cancer, because we need to talk about it, right? We need to shoot the shit about colon cancer. Right? So I've already had several colonoscopies in my life, but I think a lot of people in their brain, the big myth around colon cancer or even getting a colonoscopy is that I need to be 50 or older, right? This is something you worry about when you get older. And we know now that that's not true. You need to stay on it now.
I think it's just like with any other doctor appointment, you have to make time for it because it's so important to do these yearly checks or however many years you need to do a colonoscopy. I know for me personally, I haven't done it because I haven't had time to do it. And that's really not an excuse. I need to make time and I need to schedule it and I need to go and get it done.
Right. And listen, if you get a colonoscopy and everything, it checks out fine and you have no history in your family or no reason or no polyps, like you're probably not getting another one for 7 to 10 years. So there's no reason to say that we don't have time for it because it's not something that we have to do multiple times a year. It's not even something that you have to do yearly, right? It's to do it and get it done and stay on top of it.
I like how you bring up how big it is.
Yeah.
The surface area about how long it is because people don't think of it. It's a lot of an organ that you really need to check. And this might be a little graphic, but I remember during one of my C-sections.
The pulling your organs out. I remember mine too.
Seeing my intestines and how much of it there was. And so if you think about, there's a lot of colon in there that you really need to make sure is healthy. And that's why another reason it's so important because you don't realize how much is actually in your body.
It's taking up a lot. It's taking a lot of real estate up in our body.
It is.
Right?
It's taking a lot of the surface area up in our body.
Yeah. We need to stay on top of it. And, the center of our gut, like our gut biome and all that, that's the center of everything, right? So
it
we
is
want to make
microbiome. It affects so much of the health of your body is to have a healthy microbiome.
Yep.
So very, very important. And it is spoken about a lot more. But I do think that there's a lot for people, young people, to learn about the importance of a healthy gut.
Which brings me to an article that I was just reading that was written by Yale. They put out this whole study that talks all about how important it is to have the conversation about colon health and colorectal cancer in young people, especially with the Gen Zs, right? Especially with the younger generations in general. So they understand that this is not something for older people. And I think it's really fascinating. So we're going to spend this month talking more about butts and your colon and also talk about Brian's story.
Yes.
Which some people know, some people don't, but Brian is a colon cancer survivor, and he actually was diagnosed with cancer 15 years ago and was in his early 30s.
Very young.
Everyone was like, how could someone this young
Absolutely.
have colon cancer? At first, they believed that he was, at least a stage 3B or 3C because of how large his tumor was and some of the tests that were run. And now, 15 years later, it is so common for people under 50 to be diagnosed with colon cancer. So there's a big misconception that colon cancer only happens to somebody over 50 or older. And what we know now is that colon cancer is on the rise for young people and has been continually the last 15 years.
Right.
There are tons of studies being done. Brian was actually part of a study when he was diagnosed with cancer. They asked if he would partake in it because they were trying to figure out what is causing the rise in colon cancer among young people. And so they were looking at environmental, obviously, the food we eat, is there genetics. Brian tested, did all the genetic testing that they had at that time and didn't have any of the markers genetically. He had a really healthy diet, believe it or not, for his age at that time. He was big into yoga and things like that. So it was sort of like an anomaly, but now they know that there's so much stuff in our food, even if it's healthy,
Right.
Yes.
and environmental factors. So I think it's really important and not to fearmonger or get anybody, totally paranoid, but to talk about colon cancer. And when Brian was diagnosed with colon cancer, I believe it was like number 4 on the list for all cancers. And now, according to this report that Yale put out, colorectal cancer is actually now the number 1 cause of cancer death for men under the age of 50.
First in men.
And the second cause of cancer deaths in women under 50.
Whoa.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I thought it was 3, but it's gotten even more prevalent then.
Yes, Jenny, this year it beat out lung cancer. In fact, Yale interviewed a bunch of doctors who said they had in 1 month all of their patients diagnosed in their 30s.
That's so scary.
So scary.
So
Very
scary.
scary.
Yeah, very scary. And this article was so great, I thought, because it was really focused what Gen Z needs to know about colon cancer. And Generation Y, because it was all about, we don't talk enough about how this is becoming such a real thing for young people in colon cancer.
That's terrifying, but it tells me a lot because people talk about microbiome so much more now. And that correlates so much and it's so important. And I think a lot of people don't understand how important it is to keep our intestines and our colon healthy.
Right.
And to make sure that our microbiome or our gut bacteria is healthy.
Yes.
So
Yeah. The gut is the center of everything. I remember when Brian was working with his gastro, that was a big, all those studies were just starting to become more in the forefront, that they were doing all these studies on how to balance your biome. And also all these like fecal transplants, which we will get into this month and talk a little bit about what that is. But today what we want to do is kind of hit sort of, in general. So why we need to raise awareness for colon cancer this month and why we all just need to be aware of how we can protect ourselves. Because the great news about colon cancer is when detected early, you have a higher chance of survival than other cancers, right? So while it's sometimes scary or that we're like afraid to talk about our butts, we need to not be afraid to talk about our bums.
Right.
yes.
So I had my first colonoscopy when I was early 30s.
Okay.
Because I had a history of like gastro issues. And my doctor said, you know what, if we're going to do an endoscopy, let's just do a colonoscopy. And then after Brian was diagnosed with colon cancer, it had been about 5 years or so for me. And I've always had digestive issues and things like that. And I did another one. And I had my last one, I think, when I turned 45, which was not too long ago, people. But the interesting thing is that because I did have a polyp the last time I had my colonoscopy, I thought that just meant you come back in 5 years. And it does range from what they say. They say if you have a polyp, at least do it every 5 years.
Okay.
But my doctor actually says every 3.
Ooh.
You know what?
Oh,
There's
wow.
if the insurance is going to cover it, there's no need to wait every 3 years. So I will be getting my a colonoscopy this year.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Can I ask you a question about it?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Okay. So even though I'm, sciencey and I would love to watch a colonoscopy, I'm a little bit worried about my own. So I, for real, want to know, do you remember it? And did your butt hurt afterwards?
So the very first thing I ever did, I'm going to be honest with you, was a sigmoidoscopy,
Okay.
which you are not asleep for.
Okay.
And that was probably when I was about 30, because it only goes to a part of the colon. And this is like, if you're not at that age where it's already recommended, but they want to check it out. So that was uncomfortable for me. And I did remember it, even though I can't remember what they gave me, but I have never remembered my colonoscopy. No, it is the best nap of your life.
Okay.
And when you come home, you nap too. It's great. But no, you do not remember it at all. And you can probably request the video because, there's a camera up your bum.
So, I definitely want the video.
Yeah, so I'm sure they
was
give you
your
video.
butt sore afterwards for a day or two?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. The only thing is that the prep can be
Right.
That's
the
what I
prep
was just going to ask about.
has a reputation.
I think that's what people are afraid of is the actual prep. Now, I've heard it's gotten better over the past 5 years or so.
Yeah. Some doctors are OG and still want you to, take the prescribed stuff. And other ones, now they'll just have you go and buy over-the-counter stuff that you drink all day.
Mm-hmm.
But the prep isn't that bad. What it is you just have to stay near your toilet. And funny enough, everyone always worries about am I going to be starving? I'm going to be starving. But, when you're pooping that much, you're not like, oh, I really wish I could have a burger.
Right.
You do the morning of, think about what am I going to have after I my colonoscopy for lunch. But yeah, it honestly, I get it. It's like anything we have, talking about our bums and talking about pooping is a little bit taboo. Right. So it makes sense that there's anxiety around it. I mean, my biggest anxiety is when they switch to propofol, I get all scared about going under even though I know it's the safest they say or whatever. But every doctor I've ever had even worked with me with that and was like, hey, if you don't want to do it in the surgical center, which they do a lot of colonoscopies in, you can do it at the hospital too. So talk to your doctor about the fears, about the prep. Talk to your doctor about the fact that, hey, I'm worried it's going to hurt my bum. Right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Don't be afraid to ask those questions because it's so important. And again, it's a test that can really save your life.
Absolutely.
People don't realize about polyps is even though most polyps are not cancerous, right? Anything left in our body does what? Can turn it into something else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And they have to test them all, right? When they remove them, they test everything.
They remove all of them and they test all of them. But they also remove them because they don't want to leave that there either. And I'm not a doctor, so I will stay in my lane. And when we have a doctor on, we can ask, real deep questions. But I can talk from my own personal experience that when I had a polyp, they were like, hey, we always test it, but they also we get them out. We take them out because we don't want that stuff sitting in there,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think the anxiety leading up to the colonoscopy is way, way, way bigger than the actual colonoscopy.
Right. I think we need to have somebody on who's actually in the room when people wake up from the colonoscopies because I hear that those stories are fantastic.
The anesthesiologist?
Yeah, I want to hear all of the nurses that are taking care of you. They always say that they're the craziest stories that come out after the colonoscopy.
Yeah. Well, also too, I'm a redhead, so I was born strawberry blonde, so I have that red in my genetics. And it's funny because I've always kind of needed a little more anesthesia than others. Mm-hmm. But I've never had a problem with a colonoscopy. But I have had anesthesia problems where they had to give me heavier anesthesia. So then waking me up is like, come on, girl. You know what I mean? And I'm like, bleh. But propofol is really weird. It's like someone snaps and you're done. Mm-hmm. So in my experience, it hasn't been as crazy as anesthesia.
So did you ask any weird questions when you came out of the anesthesia care?
Nope.
Because we know you are the question queen. So we have to know, what did you ask? What did you say afterwards?
No, I definitely ask a lot of questions. What do you mean? What was the biopsy? What is the, they'll be like, they'll come in, it's no big deal. Everything was great. But we took a biopsy and this. It's like, where was the biopsy? I'm very detailed when I get.
So you didn't ask can we go get ice cream?
No.
What's for dinner?
No, but I do have a great story about when I got my wisdom teeth pulled. They gave me laughing gas or whatever they give you. And my mother will tell you that I was crazy then. I remember in the car trying to take my seatbelt off and jumping. I want to jump out of the car. And then I was like hitting my mouth saying, they took my teeth, give them back. My poor mom was like trying to keep me in the front seat down. I was a wild woman on that thing, but not the colonoscopy. Like Brian, because I typically go with him, he definitely gets a little more silly right after or doesn't remember things right away. He won't remember conversations, that we had or whatever, but I don't know. I think I'm a control freak a little bit. So
you think?
you're not under heavy sedation. So like immediately, you're more groggy, but you're not like, you shouldn't drive a vehicle.
Right.
But you shouldn't drive a vehicle, and you definitely shouldn't consume any alcohol after having
That would be a disaster.
Yeah,
I think husband clapped his hands right before he went completely under when he was getting the good drugs. And he said, all right, everyone, let's have a great time. And they were like, okay.
This one will be different. I'm just going to get a colonoscopy. But the last one I had, I did an endoscopy and a colonoscopy at the same time, which you can do because I get an endoscopy every 5 to 7 years because of history in my family as well. And the last thing I remember is that they tell you to bite down because they do your throat to your stomach first before they do your bum. And I just remember they had me bite down. And then when I woke up, it was like, that's it. And it's like nothing happened, but it's a great nap. And you come home and you're like, want to sort of take another nap later. Mm-hmm. It's actually like a very relaxing day and no one can ask you to do anything. So as a mother, sign up for that colonoscopy because you're like, sorry.
A day off.
Mom, you can't do anything. You get to watch some movies and pick the best lunch ever after.
Daddy daycare day.
Nice.
Did you guys know you should have already had a colonoscopy?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I did. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a lot of people. I mean, it's the last thing on their list and it should really be the first because again, just like our breast exams, colonoscopies save lives. Now, there are other tests that are stool tests or at-home tests that people recommended. Those are great screening tactics, right? But they don't replace a colonoscopy. It all helps, to screen in any way we can. But we want to make sure still that we're checking when we're supposed to get our colonoscopy.
Absolutely. My doctor offered for me to do one of the tests, and I know one of them is called the Cologuard test.
That's very popular. Mm-hmm.
When I was researching it, because of course she told me, well, this is always an option for you to go ahead and do before you schedule your colonoscopy. So I did find it really interesting because there are some different types of tests. But the Cologuard is really good because it analyzes the DNA markers in the stool sample and if there's any blood present, and it will also associate any of the polyps, what could be in it to if it could be probable that it could be cancerous.
If it's excreting.
And it's the DNA markers, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And it's actually really accurate. When I read through, of course, being a scientist, I want to know, well, does this really work? How accurate is it? And Cologuard can detect 92% of cancers, only 42% of large precancerous polyps, but it can detect 92% of cancers.
The actual cancer.
Which is great. Yeah.
Well, and there's also a blood test, I believe it's CEA blood test that Brian took with his cancer. And this is just to let you know, this is why we want to do all the things. His tumor was not excreting. So his blood work didn't show it.
Okay. Yeah.
But he didn't get the test until after he was already diagnosed. But now we know there's so many preventive things. Now, I've been lucky. My doctor had always done the blood and the stool test for me. I'd never done the Cologuard because I went to colonoscopy.
The FIT test, right? The FIT test?
Yeah. So I've always had that every couple of years just to check. But again, there's a history of hemorrhoids with me, right? Mm-hmm. And fissures. So for me, it's always better to kind of move on to let's do the colonoscopy. But I think all these tests are a great place to start, especially if you're young and you're not of the age yet. If you're not 45 yet, right? Maybe your insurance company's not going to cover you getting a colonoscopy because you don't have any reason to get one, right? These tests are available and usually covered by insurance, and we can talk to the doctors in more detail. But these are all things that people need to know about.
And it's better than nothing. It's better
always
than
better
nothing.
than nothing.
Right.
Exactly. It's just like with breast exam, examining yourself in the shower, right?
Right.
It's a foundational point to start, right? That we're actually being aware. And this is probably a perfect time to sort of pivot a little bit about Brian's story, but we were in New York, I believe, at the time. And we were in a taxi cab and he had told me hey, I had blood, after having a bowel movement. With my history of hemorrhoids, I was like, oh, you got a hemorrhoid? Mm-hmm. Get your first hemorrhoid, right? And then the second time it happened, there was more and it was darker this time. But the first time I can tell you it was just bright red blood. So he was like, okay, I'm going to make an appointment with the gastro. And he went in for the gastro. And I remember the day we were driving to his colonoscopy, all I kept thinking about was I wanted to stop at Coffee Bean to get a coffee, and we had ran late. Like, so selfish, right? Like, it was so ridiculous. You remember these things. I ended up having enough time to get the coffee, but he was like, why are we going, the coffee? And we're sitting in the waiting room, and he was, like I said, early 30s, and we're with a bunch of old people. It was everybody was over the age of 60 in that room waiting to get their colonoscopy, because this is 15 years ago. And the doctor, when Brian came out of the colonoscopy, was not looking me in the eye, and he was saying, hey, you're going to take him here for the CT scan. And me being who I am, I was like, I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on. And I looked him straight in the eye, and he was like, I can't, we don't want to speculate. I'm like, well, you need to tell me why you're sending me to a CT scan. And he's like, there was an obstruction. I'm like, what kind of obstruction? He's like, something that was like the size of an orange.
Ooh.
So we went, and again, when we got to the CT location, it was a very specific type of CT location. And everybody in the room was older, and clearly many going through chemo, you could tell. And we went and had the CAT scan. And again, I wouldn't leave until a radiologist talked to me, because you know me.
Right. This is your husband. You want answers. Right.
I want answers.
Yeah.
And he's still on propofol a little bit. And he's like, what is going on? Why am I going all this stuff? And I'm like, throwing the rosary at him, like, pray, everything. But it was interesting, because this radiologist was kind enough to actually, though they said they were going to call you in a few days, I was like, I'm not leaving until I talk to somebody. And he pulled us in a room, and he said, okay, we think that 2 or 3 lymph nodes have been affected, which is going to put him in the either 3B or 3C. And I was asking a ton of questions, and I was doing my thing that I always do. And then I went out into the hallway, because Brian had to go to the bathroom, and I was in a corner, and I started crying, because at this point I had not cried in front of him. And the radiologist was happening to go to the bathroom too. And he stopped, and he saw me, and he said, I don't say this often, but I've seen people survive and people not survive. And he has a shot for sure at surviving, I can tell. And he was like, and it's because of how strong you're going to be for him. And he basically told me, stay on it and don't let him see you cry. Even if you want to cry in front of him, don't. Let him know that he's going to survive and it's going to be okay. And he actually thanked me, the doctor, for being so persistent. But what we learned in that process was that Brian had always had like a little bit of digestion issues and things like that. And we probably could have done so many other things earlier. We're lucky. He is now 15 years clean, considered completely cancer cured. And we'll talk more. Yes. And we'll talk more about his journey and some of the resources that we were able to tap into, and hopefully have some people on that we connected with during that process. But the main point of the story is that we have all these preventative measures, right? And we have to stay on top of our health, because no one's going to say to you at 30, like, do you want to get a colonoscopy? Do you want to get a screening? But to say like, hey, I'm worried about this. A lot of these new screening techniques are wonderful because they don't cost much. They're not invasive. And they can give you peace of mind, whether you have history or not, because things are changing. And a lot of people who don't have a history in their family are getting diagnosed with colon cancer.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
The food we eat, the environmental. But I want to say that when I was staying with you all those years ago, when we were trying to pitch the sizzle.
Oh, yeah. The sizzle days.
You taught me a lot then, even about colon cancer, because of everything you guys had been through. And education is definitely key, because it made me a lot more aware of testing and that it could happen no matter your age. And also, you taught me a lot about what, even though I'm a scientist, really to sit and think about what I put in my body.
Yeah, what's in the food.
Yep.
Yeah, because we were so strict at that time. And we try really hard to play by this, 70-30 rule, where 70% of everything, and it probably should be 80, is super clean and you're really being aware of it. But we went through a time where we had even tomato sauce. Like if something wasn't, in the proper container, it wasn't in our house. Anything that you put on your head, to your body, it's still to this day, Brian and all of us are very, very, except for when I get my hair dyed, conscientious of what soap goes on our body, what toothpaste goes in our mouth, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff that we learned during that process was, because he was really, really strict with a diet for over a year. I mean, his whole body changed and turned around, by being plant-based. The story is really inspiring, and we'll talk about it more in another episode. And
the beet lasagna. We're going to talk about the beet lasagna.
Yeah, that actually sounds really good. I mean, to me, it sounds amazing.
It was good.
Yeah, because when you have colon cancer or any sort of gastro issues, certain things can be really acidic. Right. And as you know, Jenny, cancer and acidity, that you don't want that. You want the pH balance, right, for the body to heal. So tomatoes, while they're great for many reasons, right, can be too acidic if you're going through something like what he was. So I had to learn how to make Molly marinara sauce out of beets.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's
And
basically
it
what I
was
did.
good. It
Yeah.
was really good. But yes, you want your body to be alkaline and you don't want to put sugar in it.
And you don't want to put sugar in it.
And
'cause
acid. So, right, exactly. But I have to say, I was a little scared while we were making it, but it was really good.
I know sometimes I would have people over, like I said, no, everyone wanted to come over and see Brian and things when he was recovering. And I just wouldn't tell people it was in things. 15 years later, all that stuff I was doing is way more common thanks to TikTok and Instagram and, and it should be, and it's definitely more of a normal, right? But back then it was like, what do you mean this is made out of avocado pudding? Like, it's all these people weren't used to it. But now that things have gotten so creative, it's pretty cool. I mean, even with pizza, we had to find our version, right, of what pizza would be like for him because he still wanted to eat good food.
I remember your pizza. I remember your pizza.
Yeah. This was the funniest thing. So we will talk more about wheatgrass in another episode, but we would grow our own wheatgrass because I found out it made more sense financially, just get your own wheatgrass and grow it. So I had these tables set up. I don't know if you remember, Jenny, in that one like sort of sunroom thing. And they were tables lined up of me sprouting and doing wheatgrass, which worked out great for like 2 or 3 months. Then all of a sudden, these tiny little gnats started coming from everywhere.
no.
I realize now why people have greenhouses because we were in like a tiny, this is like our starter home. We don't have any kids. We just got married. So then I was trying to combat naturally the gnats. And then when I did that, mold started growing in the wheatgrass. I mean, it's not easy because you have to temperature control everything, right? Now I think there's like a lot more stuff available, but even our water filtration system back then, like nobody had something like that. But now everybody has alkaline water, which is good, or they're conscious of how they filter their water. So
Right.
yeah,
Definitely.
but but back to the butts.
Getting to the bottom of it.
Getting to the bottom of this, instead of being afraid, we got to think about what we can do and how we can prepare. So just like we talked about with the wildfires, we're going to talk about our butt and digestion this month. And that encompasses a lot of things, right? But we're doing that, but there it is again, to raise awareness for colon cancer and to celebrate all the brave, amazing survivors like Brian out there.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And who, are reminding all of us to always think about what's up our butt.
And to keep a healthy butt and microbiome. Yes.
The data that we're getting, don't be afraid of. I mean, it's true. Like it's on the rise, but we now have so many things at our fingertips, right? To get ahead of it. And the true story is Brian is 15 years later here and healthy, and he's getting his next colonoscopy on Wednesday. So
I'm so happy that he's okay. I remember hearing the story, which was fresh when the first time I came out and stayed with you. And it's amazing. And you've done such a great job as a family, being so health conscious and always putting awareness out there because you taught me a lot too. So I appreciate that.
I mean, we dragged a lot of friends to raw cooking classes and things like that. It was a balance because it was funny. Like some diets are good for some people and not others. Like Brian did really well on raw food. Me was like, my gastro issues are a little different. I was
going to say, I bet, yeah. It can be harsh on people. I mean, a lot of people will try it, but it can be really, really hard on your gut sometimes. And it will, give a lot of people gas. You just react to it differently. So everybody
is different, but there are some like overarching themes for all of us, right? Like we have to ask questions about what's in our food, especially our children, what they're being fed, dyes, things like that. And prevention is the key. Right.
Absolutely. So it is.
And thank God Brian is here because he helps us with you, Karis. Thank goodness he's here.
Really? Because he was like, as he wouldn't eat the spoiled milk out of the bowl today.
Well,
that's just a husband. That's just being a husband.
To wrap things up and just to remind everybody some important things about colorectal cancer, okay? It used to be considered the 4th most common cancer, right, among men and women in general. This new article, as we said earlier, says in men, it is number 1 under the age of 50 and number 2 for women under the age of 50. So this is a really important subject that we cannot forget. We all are affected by this, right? Number 2, there are a ton of myths out there that not only is it on only people over 50 get this cancer, but that it's only men, right? And it is on the rise in women. This is not, there used to be this belief system that it was only men and that it was only heavy meat eaters, right? And I'm not saying that that doesn't affect your colon health. We all know that like a healthy diet is the number one way to keep your colon healthy. But remember, now we're talking about environmental factors. Can be genetic factors. There can be so many layering things of what's in our food, what's not. So this affects all of us. So we all need to screen for colon cancer no matter what. And I think the biggest myth I think is that you only need a colonoscopy if you have symptoms. No. And there are plenty of scenarios there people did not have any symptoms, got their colonoscopy and found out they had, colon cancer. And guess what? The happy thing about colon cancer, or the positive thing I should say about colon cancer, is the fact that we know when caught early, right? You can treat it and you can live a happy, healthy rest of your life. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. In early detection, it's like 90% chance that you are going to, have past 5-year survival rate. So unlike other cancers, right? So we need to stay on top of it, and you need to do when it's recommended. And symptoms don't mean anything, Now, if you are worried about symptoms or not, or if you want to know some red flags, obviously there are a couple of symptoms that they put out there that they want you to be aware of. If you have a massive change in bowel habits, if for some reason your stool is continually, I say continually because we've all had our stool change, right?
Right.
Pencil thin or ribbon-like, again, continually, because constipation, things like that. Hemorrhoids can change your stool. Talk to your doctor, right? If you find rectal bleeding or blood in your stool and it continues, just talk to your doctor. Check it out, right? If there's a persistent abdominal discomfort you can't put your finger on, just talk to your doctor. Obviously, always unexplained weight loss and fatigue and all the other warning signs or weakness, that would be a big red flag. But these are just some simple things. Don't be afraid to talk to your doctor about what's going on up your butt, right? That's what's most important, because they've seen it all. And again, staying on top of this, we're all going to live longer and happier and healthier.
Definitely. A healthy poo means a happy you.
Yes. A healthy poo means a happy you. That's going on. That's another t-shirt. We'll have. I love that. I love that.
Just get your ass to ogross.com.
Want to talk to us about what's up your ass? Again, we're not fear-mongering here at all. We're just raising awareness. And this month is going to be all about, raising awareness. And we should not be afraid to talk about our bums. That's all it is.
Found today's episode valuable? Share it with friends, family, or anyone who should know the facts about colorectal cancer. Awareness leads to action.
If you haven't already, hit that follow button. Stay informed and never miss an important conversation that could help protect your health or even save a life. Follow us at It's So Gross on social media for expert insights, resources, and critical updates throughout Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month.
And if you want to learn more about colorectal cancer awareness, scoot your booty over to ogross.com. We will have more resources there about screening guidelines and prevention tips, and just some awesome resources to learn more about colon cancer awareness. And make sure to come back next week. We will be talking to our favorite Dr. Steve.
Oh, gross. That drama's about to end, 'cause gross. Stop asking for a friend, taboos. Icky is what we do. Psoriasis, podiatrist, and pinworms too. It's so gross. No need for strife, because gross. Life is part of life. It's just science. Yeah, it's not so weird. We got the facts, nothing to fear. Oh, gross. It's just science, no, it's not weird. It's just science, nothing to fear. It's just science, so wipe those tears. It's boogers and rash and that sticky scratch. Oh, gross. That drama's about to end, 'cause gross. Stop asking for a friend, taboo. Icky is what we do. Psoriasis, podiatrist, and